Rotisserie Draft discussion. Here we have Stephen Hagan, who finished runner-up for first place,
Yeah.
tied for breakers, which means that he didn't quite make it into the first spot. But it means next time, under the new rules of sudden death in the scenario, he would have a chance to play in for first place.
So the breaker tie was interesting because the three that were tied all defeated each other. So Dan, who got first on breakers, defeated me. I defeated Elaine, and Elaine defeated Dan. So the breaker really came down to Dan won more games 2-0,
Yes.
which is something I'm going to discuss in our discussion today of why he won more games 2-0, because I think it aligns with the philosophy that I brought in and the philosophy that I think I want to discuss today. So,
Okay, very cool. And today we're talking about, at a high level, and this is me summarizing what you said earlier, is that Commander is a closer analog to VRD than Vintage is. So that's a super controversial statement. I'm excited to hear kind of what your explanation is for that
mhm.
thought process, because I think that it's an interesting take. And looking at these lists, I can see where you're coming from. Right, we're seeing cards played that aren't played in
That's
Vintage.
played in vintage.
Right, like Inkwell Leviathan,
Right.
however, doesn't see
Used
a
to
ton
be,
of play.
but yeah, it doesn't. It used to be a tinker target, but not
Correct.
anymore, really. Yeah. There's
And
better
then
tinker targets.
yeah, there's most of these cards are vintage staples, but there's also, I mean, a lot of two card Monty things that
Right.
wouldn't see play in vintage, like Thopter Foundry, Sword of the Meek.
Right.
So okay, so yeah,
Well,
kick us off. What are you looking at here?
okay. So first we have to understand that I opted out of the first one because I didn't feel confident in my ability.
Hmm.
Because I've only played vintage like twice. I've been playing since revised in the dark, so I know all the old cards.
Yep.
I follow vintage somewhat, just to kind of keep up with the trends as a judge, right? So I kind of was timid on the first one because I was thinking that, well, this had to be, you had to know vintage, you had to know vintage, you had to know vintage. And then when the second one came along, I started thinking about it, looking at the list, and it really just started hitting me that yes, you need to know vintage. You need to know vintage in that you need to know old cards and you need to know some of those combinations. But the big difference that it was there in my mind but really solidified during the draft and after the draft
Hmm.
is this isn't vintage because of the lack of power. And what I mean by that is every vintage deck has Black Lotus and a full set of Moxes, right?
Yes. Well, or has
Or
close to
close,
that. Yeah.
right? Some close combination thereof, right?
Yes.
So they can more consistently, with mulligans, of course, but they can more consistently power out their goal quicker, right? Or
Sure.
something like Workshop, right? So let's take Workshop, Vintage Staple.
Yes.
Like it did good for me. It did very well. It won me several games, or helped me win several games. But I don't have four of them.
Right.
Is Workshop restricted in Vintage yet?
Oh, it is not, but it
Okay,
probably should
it
be.
should be right. But I don't have four of them, right? So I can't consistently do the asinine things I want to do, right? That's where I think the come into more like a thinking of like higher level EDH play comes into play is if you can find redundancy and
Sure.
you can find combos that do what you want to do or an engine that gets several combos. That was my goal, right? Was I have several combos. Let's pick an engine of some type that's going to give me access to several of those.
Right.
And I think that's what Dan did well, right? Look at Dan's list. Dan's list is a modern list with some old cards,
Well, I
or
mean,
legacy. I guess there's some
that's
legacy
yeah.
infect,
This feels very close to Legacy to me, right? It runs
right?
it runs
But
Invigorate. It
how
runs
often do you see
Berserk.
legacy infect?
I mean, it sees play.
Okay, I hadn't seen it that much. So
Yeah.
even then, it's still a legacy list
True.
with some old cards, right? He came in with a strategy.
Yep.
He got the early disruption. The first couple rounds, get the stuff you want that's better. One of the reasons I did Narset on turn two was because the rest of the Soul Rings, Soul Ring had been there, I would have taken Soul Ring. If Mana Vault had been there, I would have taken Mana Vault. I wasn't as high on Crypt. Though that was definitely in the running.
So this is interesting though, because I mean, I think Dan's actually an interesting list to point to because you're right that it's not of a vintage power level, right? It's
Hmm.
the only restricted card that's running its Ancestral Recall and Mana Vault.
Hmm.
Like those are not insane. I guess it's running more restricted cards, but Mental Misstep isn't exactly at the power level we're talking
Right.
about here. Ancestral, I think, is like the big one to point out there, but it's also not an EDH deck, right? How often do you see like blue green infect in
Right.
EDH?
But you would if EDH was a 40 card deck,
That's
right?
fair. Okay.
So you think about it as a 40 card EDH deck. Now, I mean, of course, there's some parallels that go away, right? Like, you can't build around a commander.
Right.
So I think something like Amanatu from the Commander decks would actually be a pretty strong card in this format. There's some pretty broke. There's like a dozen. Yeah, let's pull that one up here.
Yeah.
There's like a dozen 2 card combos with her that just lock out the game and win.
Sure.
She's an insane prison commander. She's really good at what she does.
So her, just
Um,
to summarize this card, right? She has a plus that is kind of a brainstorm that doesn't net you
it's
cards.
mostly irrelevant.
Yep, a minus that can blink one of your things
Any
immediately.
permanent that you own, right?
Okay.
So you can do things like Gilded Drake and then bounce your Drake back free. You
Wow.
can do things like bounce your Cabal Coffers and then use the mana to reset it. Use the mana to get double Cabal Coffers.
That seems very strong.
Or you get cards like one combo 3 card with it is Alter the Brood and Felidar Guardian, and you just Felidar bounces her, she bounces Felidar, and you just mill your opponents out. They just
Sure.
infinitely go, right? The advantage of her in Commander or EDH is that you can recast her,
Right.
right? So I don't think it's a direct parallel, but if you think about, well, would Infect get played if there was a 40 card EDH deck?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, what he has is he has consistency. He's got several, all he's got to do is protect one creature.
Yep.
He's got the protection for his, handful of creatures. He needed to get enough. He got them.
Yep.
So who's he got it for attackers here? We have
Glistener Elf, Blighted
Glistener
Agent,
and Blighted. We've got
Ichor Necropede, and
Necropede.
Blightmare.
Yeah, 5.
Oh, and Viridian Corruptor.
6. So
Yep.
6 attackers, right?
Correct.
Blight
And Blight
Mamba, if he
Mamba.
main decked it, I don't know if he did or
I
not.
can't imagine.
So at least 6 attackers, but that's all he really needs.
Yep.
He's got the draw, he's got the counter spells. In my game against him on camera, he on turn 3 he attacks with Glistener. He goes for scale up. I mana drain the scale up,
Wow.
right? Or this may have been turn 4, but I mana drain the scale up, and then he goes invigorate berserk, kill me. Right. So here is I have the mana drain, right? I have the answer to
Yeah.
stall him out and then maybe lock him out the next turn, and he does that.
Meanwhile, he could have had Force of Will the
Right.
entire time as well.
Right. He could add any other number of spells, but the fact is like he just. But that's that type of consistency, right? When you go in with an EDH mindset for high end EDH, it's okay. I want to include redundancies because it's a singleton format.
Yep.
I want to include these things to make up for the fact I can't have 4-ofs.
Sure.
Right, which is part of why I went into red. Was I wanted Duretti and Goblin Engineer. I let Goblin Engineer slide a little too late. Eric was on my vibe. Took Goblin Engineer right before I was going to take it. I was going to take it with that Inkwell pick on the right before the break.
Yep.
It was my pick right there. He nabbed it. I cried. Because it would allow me. So if they countered Grindstone, if they countered Servant, if they countered, it can fetch Sword to the Yard automatically, right? It could buy back any of those things. So that it could also buy back Lotus, right? Which is
Right.
which I did have a game where I bought back Lotus 4 times with Goblin Welder. It was just like every other turn, just getting Lotus back.
Sure.
So, but that was that thing. It was like, all right, so here are a handful of 2 card Monis, maybe 3 card Monis that I can do. They're powerful cards, mostly powerful cards on their own. The only ones that were bad on their own were the Lattice and the Puzzle Box. The Lattice was in the board anyway.
Yep.
The Puzzle Box I did main deck.
That's an interesting call because you already had so many combos.
Well-
Why did you decide that you needed? Because okay, let's walk through them. Right, you have Karn plus Lattice,
Karn plus board.
Karn
right.
plus anything.
Right.
Yeah. You have Painter Grindstone.
Right.
You have the Urza
Thopter Foundry,
Sword of
Inkwell.
the Meek.
Urza was bad. Or yeah, Sword of the Meek, not Inkwell.
Yep.
Urza was bad in my deck.
The
I
other
think,
two are fine
right.
though.
But the other two's fine, and they won me games just on their own.
And then you have a whole bunch of tutors. Are
Yeah.
there any other ones we're missing there?
Windfall to go with Narset.
Yep. And Narset and Puzzle Box was the fifth one.
Right. So the reason to Puzzle Box main deck is because I didn't ever want Karn dropping could get me the other half of his combo. I didn't want to have to depend on other things like having Karn and Narset to get that combo.
Sure.
Right. So I was able to get it with Fabricate. I was able to get it with Whir. And then go or buy it back with Welder if it got to the yard somehow.
Sure.
So the idea was to make sure I had that combo available,
Yeah.
and I won again. I won games with every combo in the deck.
So
at some point or another.
here's my counterpoint to this, right? In EDH, you have a lot of the same benefits you do here, right? You have Singleton, you have the most powerful cards available to you ever, uh, but in EDH you don't know what the other seven players are on when you walk into a tournament.
Hmm.
So like, this is I think a side effect of what happened in this particular event, but like nobody drafted Energy Flux, for
Right.
instance.
Someone
So
did. Elaine did.
Elaine had Energy
Yeah,
Flux.
she had energy flux.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's embarrassing for me. But the point is, I think in this draft there was far less hate drafting than there was in other ones,
Right. No,
right?
that makes sense.
So I think that like, I mean, Ancient Grudge never was drafted, right?
Hmm.
Shenanigans was, but
Right.
like, there's just so many silver bullets that just people didn't take that I think could have interrupted really strongly. Also, in this particular one, counterspells were minimal, right? There
Right.
were a few, but it wasn't like we had the heavy big blue decks that we're used to seeing in VRD. If we compare this to like VRD 8, where you have like every single deck running counterspells,
Right.
it's a very different world. Similarly, at that point in time, there were just like all sorts of crazy numbers of like seed time was drafted, for instance.
Right.
There's just like a lot of cards that we had a conversation with Alex about this yesterday about kind of how to draft hate cards and how to know when to counter pick.
Hmm.
Basically, when to waste to pick to take someone else's. And one of the things that came up is like counter picking is really bad the vast majority of the time. The one time where it's potentially reasonable is when you have somebody that's potentially taken like sort of a meek, because you can take Thopter Foundry and just shut off their entire combo. Similarly, like Grindstone, you can
Right.
take Painter Servant and
Well,
kill them.
I mean, I will say I had a massive advantage in for the two card Monte combo in that I was on a bookend.
That's
Right.
very true.
So,
Yeah.
and that's why some people were like, "Oh, why would you pick that early?" Because I wanted to make sure of that.
Yeah.
But I think even not on a bookend, maybe you don't have to go two cards. But like, let's take a look at Elaine's deck, right? I mean, I
Sure.
think this feels like a Kess EDH control deck to me.
That's very true,
You know,
actually.
this deck is like the three best decks that are by record were me, Dan, and Elaine.
Yes.
Dan feels like a 40 card EDH deck to me.
Sure.
Elaine feels like a non combo based. And, you know, I mean, like the best card game one against Elaine, I beat her 2-0.
Yep.
Game one against Elaine, I knocked her. I dropped turn two Lotus into Narset, turn three Puzzle Box,
Sure.
and locked her out of the game, and she scooped. The next game, we had a really good back and forth game with all sorts of shenanigans, and I was beating her down with tokens from Thopter and Sword,
Hmm.
and she had. I was clearly going to win, actually, at one point. I can't remember which walker I had out, but it was locking her out pretty hard, and she managed to drop Nicol Bolas.
Right.
And then she had both Bolas, or she finished a flip Bolas,
Yes.
actually. So she flipped Bolas, and that changed the game.
Yep.
I do think, in that note, Planeswalkers are vastly underrated in this format.
That's fair.
I think they're really hard to deal with because there's not as many people drafting aggressive creature decks. You're trying to do big splashy creatures often, or kind of boom boom Grizzlebrand one card, hit smashes.
Yes.
There's not a lot of direct hate cards, and obviously a lot of people aren't running burn. So I think Planeswalkers are really hard to deal with, and therefore really good.
I think the only direct card we had was Angrath's Rampage to deal with
Mm-hmm.
Planeswalkers.
And it was a great pick. I love that card.
Yeah, me too.
It's so versatile in this artifact Planeswalker creature.
Yes. And we also had Sword of Sinew. Is that the card?
Yeah, Sinew and
Yeah. Sinew and Steel.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, those were the only two cards, both relatively recent pickups, that people had that could directly answer Planeswalkers. Hero's Downfall, I don't think saw play.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it did. But Devil maybe.
Bedevil, I believe, did. You're right. Oh, no,
Okay.
we're both wrong.
I was thinking of something else.
Vraska's Contempt didn't
No,
see play.
Tim did not for sure.
But yeah, there's just like a lot of Dreadboard didn't see play this time. But that's interesting, right? The fact that there's no direct burn, right?
Right.
Chain Lightning went 45th pick. Like,
Yeah.
that helps a lot for the Planeswalker strategy. I would really love to see this against a world where somebody is drafting Zoo, right? Somebody is drafting Wild Nicottle deck, and somebody
Right.
is drafting a burn deck.
Yeah, I think that changes things. I
Right.
mean, I made a couple of my picks were bad anyway, and I would wanted a Toxic Deluge in one of those spots.
Yes, that card's great.
But I mean, just looking at Elaine's deck, I think again, it feels to me like a good EDH control focused list, right? Here's things I want to do. I've got this little bit of combo to lead to a Doomsday, but I've got a variety of answers. But it's not, if you just it's still kind of a control shell. I just don't think
Fair.
that we have the pieces. Vintages to me is influential in it, but I don't think that we have the pieces to like say like, oh, I'm going to build this shell, because you're just not going to have the consistency to do that thing, that shell, right?
So that's actually super interesting. Just looking back at the history of the Northwest Vintage Rotisserie
Mm-hmm.
Draft, if we look here, where Mishra's workshop got taken,
Mm-hmm.
um, okay, and the first one it didn't, but that's a bad example for my case here.
Right.
Mishra's workshop got taken first round
Oh wow.
in the second Vintage History Draft,
Right.
and then as you watch it proceed through,
How'd that deck do? 1 and 6.
it went terribly, right?
Right.
And this was people started talking about this. So the first one it went 1 and 6. The second one, the workshop deck, let's see where it went. So it went
6.
yeah, six pick, went 1 and 6.
Right.
That was when Jed drafted it. And then it proceeded to kind of move down the rankings until the VRD 8. I don't believe it was drafted, or it may have been taken 40, or may have been taken 45th. No,
Yeah,
okay,
17.
taken 17th and went only 4 and 3.
Right.
And it wasn't in a dedicated artifact deck,
Right.
but it proceeded to kind of go where the mono brown deck just got drafted lower and lower and lower.
That
and
goes to your
kept
hate card
losing.
conversest. I think that
Yeah.
the easiest to hate is artifacts,
Easily,
right?
yeah.
With value, right?
Yep.
And I mean, and that was the one thing where I went wrong is
It went 45th in the first VRD,
okay,
and it didn't. I don't think he even played it
right,
because it's
limited
so
in
constricting.
a way,
Yeah.
right? It was good for me. I would not have cut it. Because it allowed me to drop like painters and grindstone,
Yes.
or what, etc. on a turn. It allowed me to drop pieces like that.
But not activate them.
Not activate them, right? I often had to wait a turn.
Yes.
Depending on the turn, right? If it was like turn 3 and I already had the other mana, I might be
Right.
able to. But the, I think where I went wrong actually is in my head. I was watching. This actually came up during the commentary. I was rewatching the matches and watching the commentary
Mm-hmm.
on the draft. And in my head, this was an artifact deck.
Yes.
It was not. I should have. This should in my head have been a Super Friends list
Yes. I agree.
with artifact combos, because the artifact combos are too easy to hate out.
Yep.
And I'm happy with all my artifact combos. I would not have changed my combos, but some of my other, I would not have gone in on some of the other artifacty things, right? I would have kept him for the combos, but I would have not taken Urza. I would have not taken like Trinisphere, which just set my
Leviathan?
board. Inkwell was actually one of the only 2 creatures I main decked. I main decked Wormcoil and Inkwell.
Okay.
It could have easily just have been something else. It's too easy to do Goblin Welder up.
Sure.
The idea was pitch it, Goblin Welder it, right?
Reasonable, and I guess like it's a very resilient hate piece with Shroud anyway.
No one had like, yeah, that was actually one of the few that I didn't main deck either. Scroll down a bit.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
I did not main deck Forge Master or Battlesphere.
Forge Master seems so good.
I
but
didn't
once
have enough
again,
artifacts.
Yeah, you're not an artifact
I
deck.
was thinking I was an artifact deck, which is
Yeah.
why I did not. Like Whir actually was far worse than Fabricate. A lot of times I had trouble casting Whir.
Yep.
Fabricate was amazing. Like
Sure.
there were so many games where I just fabricated Black Lotus and won.
Yeah.
Because I like one game I fabricated Black Lotus. This is a sideboard game against Brent. I sacked something, fabricated Black Lotus, played it, sacked it, did something, and bitter ordealed for 3 to take out the 3 targets I couldn't deal with. Take out his big Blight Seal, to take out his
Oath maybe.
Emrakul,
Okay.
and to take out his
Bane of
green
Progress?
Bane of Progress.
Yeah.
And he immediately scooped when I
Sure.
took those out.
At that point, yeah, he's going for he wasn't playing Malira, but he's literally getting a Death Ray Shaman.
Yeah,
That's the
I mean,
only
he had-
creature left.
he had little-
in prime time maybe.
Yeah, he had prime time, but I mean, I could deal with all that stuff.
Yeah.
I had an active Duretti on the board,
Fair.
Red Black Duretti, who was amazing for me.
So this is actually interesting. I think that's a good analog then. If EDH were 40 cards and didn't have a commander, this would actually be a pretty similar experience,
Yeah.
right? Like you don't get to play all the Moxen, you get to play 1, maybe 2 Moxen. And you get kind of like a very few number of powerful cards and then a lot of legacy power level cards.
Right.
That seems correct. So in that world, I think there's actually a closer analog than EDH even, which is Canadian Highlander. I think that like Canadian Highlander with its points list is really close to what VRD is, because at that point you're like, I mean, Doomsday got lowered to 2 points. You're allowed, I think, 10 points in the format.
Okay.
But like Black Lotus is 8 points. So like if you're going to take a Black Lotus, it means that you're getting screwed and basically kind of ending up at a spot where you have, what is this, like 14 picks before you get your next pick. Like
Right.
so that's a pretty close
Yeah.
similarity. I think the Flash is something like 7 points in that format, but there's also a ton of cards that are 0 points. So for instance, Power Artifact I think is no points.
Right.
Um,
I didn't even run Transmute Artifact because I didn't have enough artifacts to make it really worthwhile.
wow.
And again, like the 40 card made some choices. That was one thing that when I was drafting, I wasn't always thinking about was I'm going to have to tune this down
Yeah.
to 15 to 16 land, depending on what I end up with.
When I was curmudgeonly on commentary complaining the entire time, that's what I was saying. Is that like
Right.
these people are drafting like they're playing a 60 card deck.
Yep. I totally was.
And
And then as I was cutting, I was like, I hate this.
right, right, because any one of those cards you cut could easily be like for you a boil,
Right.
or it could be a like
Right.
it could be such powerful hate cards. You could have a Hydroblast.
Right.
That's a terrible example, but you could have a Pyroblast.
Right, right.
And that would hit hit 7 of the 8 players. 7 of 8 players were on blue, and nobody drafted choke.
Yeah.
Right, like that's just mind blowing to me.
Yeah. I don't think. So the Lily of the Veil idea, the black really the only black I had was Duretti, Lily of the Veil, and then I needed the black for the Thopter Foundry.
Do you need Thopter Foundry? I thought Thopter Foundry was blue black.
It's blue and white or black, white or black. It's white or black hybrid.
Oh, okay, so it's an Esper, the other
Yeah.
half. Okay.
So it's an Epster. So I was telling on the original commentary, if any of you watched it, that when Eric took Dak,
Yep.
I jumped in and said, all right, because I had been holding off on red. I knew I was going to go into red. I've been holding off because I figured I could wait and get those cards late.
Sure.
As you can tell, I mean, that wasn't a big part of my philosophy was holding off. Like, I knew I wanted Narset and Karn. They were central to my deck idea.
Yep.
I said, I'm just going to take them. I don't know. They're too new. I don't know where people are going to value them. It's kind of hard to say. I think they're both super value cards anyway. Karn kills Mox. I messed up Elaine by killing one of her Mox with Karn.
Yep.
Karn tutors for great things in the board. And then Narset shuts off card draw. I was very happy with them. They both see vintage play anyway. I would not change those picks, honestly.
Sure.
But at that point, I argued I should have audibled out of red and gone into white. I think if I would have put Teferi Time Raveler,
Go for it.
pull up am I set to type?
Yes.
Okay.
So Teferi Time Reveler is the new one, the three
The
drop.
3-drop, yeah.
That lets you cast all of your spells as if they were instants.
Yeah.
It's just Teferi Time.
Okay.
And yeah, it lets you cast all your spells like they're instants, and lets your opponents cast their spells when they're sorceries.
Right. And then Knowledge Pool.
Sure.
That gives me another lock that does the same things I want to do, right? The same kind of 2-card Monty locks, because it locks them completely out of the game, and then I'm able to do things.
Sure.
That also lets me pick Lavinia up later as the last pick, and she does the same thing with Knowledge Pool.
That's reasonable.
So I think if I do that there, now that's going to be weird because I'm going to just cut Liliana the Veil at that point. I'm not going to run the double black.
Which is fine, though.
I'm fine. I mean, I hate not running a 5 pick, but a lot of people didn't run some high picks because they had to change up their deck.
Yeah, Brent's deck kind of started off...
yeah.
Like, Brent started off in a bunch of different directions.
He had
and then-
Tinker in his deck. He
Yep.
did not play Outcome.
But, like, Coins, I think, is the real travesty of this, where he had a beautiful-looking Storm deck.
He did.
And then got scared out of it when people on the break started talking about hate drafting him. And he went into this weird Nekusar deck that I think
Right.
was fine.
He had some funny stuff going on in there.
Yeah.
That was like so. My round Coins was my first matchup. Wasn't
Yes.
on camera. Game 1, he hits me. I have a beautiful hand that's going to turn 2, basically win. But it has to have the Lotus. It's like land Lotus, turn 2, win. I don't remember exactly. Turn 2 or 3 win. I don't remember exactly what it was. But he hits me game 1 with the scroll down. Shattered Dreams. Takes
Okay.
Lotus, right? Then he drops. Yeah, so it takes Lotus with Shattered Dreams, and
Yep.
then he drops. This card was amazing for him, by the way. Dreadhorde Arcanist.
That card, we talked about this on camera, but this card, I think, massively overperformed my expectations.
Did you see it in the later game where he had a Jeet on it?
No. Yes, I did. Because
Okay.
he ended up casting a wheel off of it.
Yeah. Oh my, Jeet on a Dread. That's
He
absolutely.
also like minused the Rel first to get. He had the option to minus it to get double wheel if he
Right.
wanted to. but decided not to because Brent was on a 50 card deck or something stupid.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he Arcanist back the Shattered Dreams, and then like
Yes.
went from there to even more. Right. So he wrecked me game one with that kind of stuff. Game two, I don't remember how I beat him. It was like I think I locked him out with Karn.
Sure.
And then game three was funny. This actually will appear probably a picture in Eric's article on
Nice.
Channel Fireball because the board state involved me with Karn, Lattice, Ensnaring Bridge, Puzzle Box.
Hmm.
He'd killed my Narset, but I had Puzzle Box.
Okay.
Him,
Let's pull up Teferi's puzzle
yeah,
box.
it's very key to this.
It's a funny card and it's starting to see some
They've
play.
spiked to $35
Jeez.
because of Narset combos.
It looks like ninth edition is still 10. At least you can buy them
Okay,
on whatever this is pointed at for 10.
right,
But yeah, the Visions one is $24 right now.
yeah. So TCG mid was about 30 when I looked the other night.
That's
So
ludicrous.
yeah. So
This art is great, by the way.
oh, that old school
Shout
art.
out to Kaya Folio.
Oh yeah,
Kaja
the
Folio?
folios were
Yeah.
huge in the early art for all D&D and all that.
Folio's done a ton of like what's the other one's name?
Phil.
Phil Folio.
Yeah.
He had all those like kooky, weird, like cartoony looking
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, they were married. They did. I assume they still are, but they did a lot of art in Dungeon and Dragon in the
Okay.
early magazines. They were really key for the magic and
I think he did those little the little pink things that ran around in Urza's
the Beebles.
Beebles.
I would
Yeah.
imagine that seems like a
Hold on, let's see. Random tangent, but
yeah.
I really love. Nope. That's Jeff Miracola apparently.
Okay.
Anyway,
Right.
but yeah, it's that kind of style.
Right. So I had Puzzle Box, Bridge, Karn, and Lattice.
Yep.
He has the keys. I don't have Narset, so he's not locked out. But he has Chains of Mephistopheles.
Oh my God.
So pull up
Okay. So chains is best described with a flowchart, but
right.
we don't have that. So we're gonna give you this better wording that's in the Masters Edition.
So it's similar to Narset.
Yep.
In that after the first card, right? After the first card you draw, things are going to happen.
Yes.
Let's go ahead.
So if you draw any card outside of your draw step, first you have to discard a card before you draw it. If you can't discard, you first of all don't get the card you were going to draw, but you also mill one.
Right. So,
If you draw the card in your draw step and it's the first card, you get it for free.
Right.
So you get to draw one card a turn on your turn. Otherwise, you always have to pitch one before you draw.
okay, but we have Puzzle Box,
Yes.
remember? So we draw a card, then we have to put our first draw the draw step, and then we have to put it on the bottom and draw another card. So then we're both hellbent.
Yes.
So then we draw a card, put it on the bottom, mill one. Now, if we're an instant, we could cast it in between the puzzle box. But I have Karn and Lattice, so he can't tap lands. He has Null Rod, so I can't tap lands.
Yeah.
So we're both just milling one a turn, and he's got Bitter Blossom. Now I have no hands, and I have Bridge. He can never attack. So he slowly dies to his own Bitter Blossom.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was a convoluted game state, only possible in EDH in this format.
Yeah. No, that's super real.
But it was funny.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah.
I never thought of the interaction between chains and puzzle box before, but that is. But once again, if you didn't have the bridge in that case, you just straight up lose.
Yeah, I Karned it in.
Yeah.
It was in my Karn board.
Yeah,
So I
that
didn't
makes
run
sense.
Bridge Main because there's not enough creature decks that I thought it was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wasn't drawing a lot of extra cards. So Welder or Duretti drew me cards, but
Did you ever play the Silas? I saw you drafted it.
I did not.
Okay.
It was that the weird, cute last draft pick. It was something I think that should
You gotta
have
send
been.
a message.
Yeah, that should have been several things, but not that. Actually, I wanted originally my thoughts, but I forgot to write it down.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to draft, but Elaine drafted it much earlier anyway, so it didn't matter. I wanted Dovin Ban or the new Dovin,
Really?
Dovin Hand of Control.
Okay.
That card seems really good in this format.
Yeah, the fact that it
Artifacts, instants, and sorceries cost one more, and then
Yep.
it can just bubble something, right? So pure bubble, like
I mean, you play him for the plus ability or for the static ability.
yeah.
You know?
But I mean, you pure bubble a Grizzlebrand. It's any permanent, so
Yeah.
you could pure bubble. As long as they're not killing you on the turn they summon it.
Yes.
It's I don't
Which,
know.
if they're summoning Grizzlebrand, you're probably dead in that turn anyway.
Right.
But yeah, no, fair point. Like if they're beating down the Tarmogoyf.
Well, if they don't have haste to attack with it, they're going to run out of. I mean, they generally have to get an attack with Grizzlebrand.
True. True.
especially in this format.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I think that is a good way of thinking about this format because you're not going to have the same kind of power level and consistency that you do in a true vintage format.
Right.
Um, and that's just demonstrated by the sheer number of Moxen, right? That's the easiest metric here.
Right, and that's the metric I thought of. Right, is like most, not all, but most have Lotus, a full set of Moxen, even if they're off color, just because it's mana. You
Yes.
know. But I mean, let's take look at Naveen's list. I mean, he had to draft Packrat. I think that's a solid pick in this format.
Yep.
But what does Packrat do for him? It discards big creatures and provides an alternative threat. I don't think that that's that kind of shows that outside of the box thinking that really EDH thinking helps about, right? Commander thinking helps about, like, well, what can I do with this card? How can I get the things I want to do here at a reasonable cost? And that's the other thing you've got to think about is at a reasonable cost.
So okay, here's an example of a Canadian Highlander
Okay,
list to
and
take
I'm
a
not
look
familiar
at.
with this format. So.
Yes. So the idea for this format is there's a points list. I'm not an aficionado. Like there's just no one down here that plays it. But I
Right.
think that it is kind of a really cool format in that you get to chance to play with some of those powerful cards in Magic, and you don't have to like.
So it's still 100. It's still a EDH.
It's exactly 100
Okay.
cards. It's the same rules of EDH, but you just don't have a commander.
Okay. So Commanderless EDH with a point system.
Correct, and the point system is really cool because for every 100 cards you play, you get to have a you get to get 10 points, I believe it is. Let me
Okay.
pull up the points list currently. That's actually let's talk about that first before we get into this specific list.
Right.
But yeah, here it is.
So
And
recall just went up to 7.
all right, so here we go. Yeah, recall is 7 points. You get 10 points for every 100 cards. Remember, so if
Okay.
you want to do a Battle of Wits deck, you can, but consistency goes way down.
Right.
Most people play exactly 100. Fast Bond just got lowered to 0 points.
Mm-hmm.
Flash is down to 6. It was 7 for a while.
Okay.
Lotus is 7.
Yeah, Moxes are 3 and 2. That's not bad, right?
Right, so if you want to, you can run 3 Moxen in your list.
Right, and then just a whole bunch of zeros and
Yes.
1-1.
So it's actually like very similar to VRD, where like if you're lucky, you get to run 2 Moxen,
Right.
and then maybe you run like Mox, one of the other unfair Moxen that aren't listed here. But yeah, like
And everything not on that list is 0. Then.
is all 0, correct?
Okay.
So it's a very similar thing. I mean,
cool. I
in
like
this case, actually, True Name is a card that I think went underdrafted. Paul Waite talked about how that card should see way more play than it did.
Yeah.
And it just like get way drafted earlier. But yeah, no, it's a very similar kind of idea, right? You have all the broken mana gets pointed. Some insane combo pieces like Flash and Birthing Pod get pointed. But in general, you can play whatever you want. So with that in mind, I think let's pull up an example list here. This is a Jeskai control list. I don't know very much about this format, but apparently Kyle Clark took first for this one.
Okay.
So
Congrats, Kyle.
yeah, good job. So pointed cards that Kyle has on his list. Let's see, Soul Ring.
Yeah.
I assume that one's pointed. And I don't see an Ancestral. That's kind of where like my mind first went
Right.
for this.
Force, maybe?
No, Force gonna be
With
0.
Snapcaster?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't see a lot of... True Name.
True Name's 1 point. Yep.
Yeah.
Soul Ring was how many? 3 points.
Okay.
There were no Mox in here. Nope.
No. Any tutors were appointed, maybe?
Let's see.
He's got Mystical, is that...
Oh, Mystical probably is pointed. Yep. And Dig Through Time maybe. Dig Through Time's 1 point.
Mystical's 2.
Mystical's 2 points. So
Right.
now we're up to.
So he's got a lot of
already
little
6.
value, draw cards, things like that are appointed,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. So it's kind of just like.
Yeah, it's a cool format.
Right. It's a really interesting format, and you get a chance to play with Black Lotus
Right.
and Moxen without having to spend $10,000 on your
Right.
deck.
So go back to the point list. I want to just think about one of my better EDH decks.
Yeah.
And,
Doomsday just recently got dropped to 0 as well.
okay, so Amanatu has Enlightened, which is 1.
Yep.
Crypt, which is, so that put me at 4.
It would play gifts if it could.
Yeah, Mana Drain would put me at 5. No, I don't run Drain, sorry. Vault would put me at 5.
Yep.
Mystical would put me at 7. Soul Ring would put me at 10.
Strip Mine, no.
I don't run it, no. I don't run any more of those. So I run Vampiric, so that'd put me at 12. So I'd have to consider some of those down. Okay.
Right, and you'd probably want to run some of these.
Right, some of the
cards that are
monsters.
banned.
Right. Yeah.
Right, so it's because this format has no ban list.
Right.
You get a lot of the interesting kind of tension there, where like, yeah, you can play a Flash if you want to, but
Right.
it means that you're throwing away 2 Moxen. which is a tough
Yeah,
pill to
yeah, that's a
swallow.
tough call.
So simply, yeah, demonic tutor being 3 points is very
Oh yeah,
real.
demonic. So actually, I'm up to 15. Yeah, so
Yeah, so like,
yeah,
it,
that's real.
right, this format kind of is very similar to Commander, but it's a 1v1 format.
hmm
You have the assumption that everyone's trying to build for power that you don't have to have necessarily in Commander, and there's not going to be any kind of the theme nonsense that you get in
Right.
Commander.
So
So
let's take that back to our draft real quick. I was thinking about the
yeah,
tutors there. So one of the things that I thought about, I originally was pondering like a black red prison list.
okay,
But for that to work, I knew I needed to get in on the tutors quick,
yep.
and obviously the tutors went. The two best tutors went in the second round with vampiric and demonic.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating. Normally you see Vampiric Demonic. Oh, actually, no, Demonic went earlier.
Yeah,
Okay,
demonic went.
I thought Naveen got both of those, but
No,
he got Imperial Seal.
yeah, yeah, seal.
Normally, I normally see like 8th seed just snap up the two tutors.
But so again, I think those go into that EDH type mentality, right? Because if
Yes.
I'm looking for why are tutors so good, if you actually talk to casual EDH players versus like 80, so there's a great article that talks about like levels of EDH, right? Or
Hmm.
I still call it EDH. I'm an old man, so I refuse to call it Commander most of the time. There's CEDH, which is generally built for 1v1. These are
Yep.
crazy, crazy combo decks that are doing crazy, crazy things.
Yep.
And then there's the 70 to 85% decks, which is what I generally run, which are we win most of the time. They're very good decks. They clean up on casual tables. People talk bad about them, but they can't hold up to the CEDH decks most of the time,
Sure.
particularly in 1v1. So those players, those two sets versus the more casual players, one of the big differences in conversations is how many tutors. Do you have redundancy of tutors to get to your pieces? A lot of people think that pure EDH should not have as many tutors because it's a singleton format.
I'm now of that school. I just took apart my Zur Doomsday deck, which was entirely tutors, aiming for combo. It had Laboratory Maniac as the only win condition. It ran Pull from Eternity, which is a card that doesn't even see play in this
Yeah,
format.
it's a white.
Yep, it's a single white that pulls cards from exile. So if
Yeah,
they somehow your lab man managed to get exiled, you pull it back and then can win the game from there.
yeah.
But
I
it
was
was
thinking that Rift Sweeper would be a good draft in a couple of these
true,
green decks. So,
very true.
which is very similar. So,
A similar one. What's the card that exiles face down and then lets you demonic tutor them?
ooh, I don't know
You know what I'm
that
talking about?
one.
This
No,
one?
I don't know that one.
Oh, it's one black black for a tutor that searches from the top of their library. It's not Yawgmoth's Agenda, Praetor's Grasp.
Oh, Grasp. Right, right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so this card is the one card that if this resolves against me in my Zur combo deck,
Right.
I just can't win. I have no way to get a card back that's face down in an opponent's exile.
Right.
So like this card just would literally shut me down. But I've scaled that deck back to just be a blue-black control list that's playable on a kind of casual fun table. That's not it's not unpowerful, right? It
Right.
still like
No, it's good. I like
crushes
that. It's
people.
very powerful. It's an 80. It's a 70 to
Right.
85 percenter.
It runs Time Twister, it runs Mana Vault, it
Right.
runs Mana Drain, it runs all the good cards, but it like doesn't run Demonic, doesn't run Imperial Seal, doesn't run Vampiric. It pulls back on so many of these cards, just with the idea that you don't want to be as consistent as you need to be in a format like VRD, Canadian Highlander,
Right.
or in competitive EDH.
Right. But yeah, so I think the tutors, early on, that highlights again that style, right? You're trying to go for some form of consistency in what you're going for.
Yes.
My philosophy involved the alternative, which is that I can't get as much consistency because I'm not going to be able to get all the things I want. I want lots of 2 and 3 card monis
Yes.
to be able, because I had an EDH deck for a while it was a Braille list, and there's a lot of just Braille combo tutor list. I ran no tutors in it. It was
Really?
actually, sorry, I ran one Recruiter the Guard, a creature only tutor.
That's funny.
It had 32 infinite auto win combos in it.
Yes.
With sometimes 2 pieces, sometimes 4 pieces.
Yep.
But it was oops, I win. It was literally you'd be playing the deck and you'd go, oh, okay, well, oops, I win.
Yep.
And that was kind of thinking like this. I don't want that, obviously. I want some, but I want these like 3 or 4 combos and be able to have a few ways to try to assemble them, right?
Well, and you did have a lot of tutors, right? So
Yeah.
like we can talk through that, but like you had Whir of Invention, Fabricate. Let's see, there were at
Those
least
were the 2.
more.
That was it.
No, because you had. I mean, you didn't play it, but Koldath of Forge
Right,
Master.
right.
You
Yeah, I
had,
could have had more artifacts. It just didn't have the consistency.
Yeah.
Welder to get things back.
Yep.
Welder to recur, which, as I said, was huge. Another card, do not regret, won me 2 games at least. Ashiok Dreamrender
That card's very
was
good.
phenomenal.
Anyone in the chat, do you have any questions about this format? We're talking about Vintage Rotisserie Draft. It's a pretty unique format where the first player in the
Can't see the
list.
chat right now. That's anyone. You gonna say
There's no one
okay?
chatting on it right now, but
Okay.
we got like 4 or 5 people hanging out with us.
Cool.
Um, it's a pretty unique format where you have the first player has a essentially you can think of it as gets an open hand of every card in Vintage. So in this case, it was Steven. He took Black Lotus first pick, and then the second player has a choice of everything in Vintage but Black Lotus. Dan decided to take Ancestral Recall, and it proceeds along until everybody has 45 cards. You do a snake draft, so at the end of this, you can see we kind of go back and forth. Um, Vince on the end got two Moxen in eighth and ninth pick,
Right.
and you end up building a really powerful deck.
I think I liked Vince's deck in some ways. He made some really bad picks here and there,
Yeah,
but I think his mistake was that he said, says he had the green and white. He said I have to be in the green white, and kind of kept that. I think he could have gone out into a third, or obviously the fast bond pick, which we lack of fast bond, which we ragged him about all day long.
yeah. Lack of fast bond, lack of balance, lack of even
Right,
mind
but Vince was
sensor.
one of my only losses. I mean,
Sure.
so my losses were Vince and Dan. Vince game one, I just grindstonered him out. It was quick, and it was just like turn two grindstone, turn two painter, turn three grindstone, turn four win. Um,
He
the
was one of the few players that had interaction for artifacts.
He had
And
hate.
Reclamation Sage and
Right.
Collector Oof.
Well, his oof was the yeah. Game two and three involved his oof and involved just dry. He had dried Milton like every game against me, which wasn't
Yep.
great, but he was also a little more aggressive in that.
Right, he was one of the few proactive decks. There's a
Right.
lot of decks here that screwing around trying to control people like Elaine's deck, or trying to kill people with combos like your deck.
Right.
And his deck was just straight up, I'm going to kill you on turn 6.
Yeah.
I'm going to beat down with 1 mana 2/1s.
My one of my favorite cards in the deck was actually Black Red Duretti because it gave me interaction that I didn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of creature kill, and so like the only game Brent took from me was he had Oath and I had Black Red Duretti, and the only creature that mattered for him to hit was Blightsteel, and he hit Blightsteel off the top of the
Oh my
Oath,
goodness.
and I couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I drew a card and said nope, I lose. Because Black Red Ready won me several games just being able to kill creatures or artifacts
Sure.
and just put up little dudes to enable things. So
So what kind of takeaways can we have from this? If we have the idea that this is a singleton format, it is probably closer in power level to competitive EDH than it is to Vintage. I think is fair. I think when I placed this out, I said the power level is somewhere between Modern and Vintage, which I think is like a reasonable way of describing it. But
Singleton Legacy.
yeah, Singleton Legacy is pretty accurate as well. But I mean, Singleton Legacy, I think this is better than that.
I think so. I think the power level.
You get to run insane cards,
Right.
and you have a 40 card deck, whereas Legacy you're stuck with 60.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more consistency than Singleton Legacy would give you. But yeah, I mean the power level's somewhere in that range. So what kind of takeaways does that prejudice you towards certain decks? Like, does it prejudice you against burn? Does it make you want to be in the combo deck like you were this time in general, or do you think is that just how where you ended up this time?
I think for my style, it makes me want to be in the combo deck.
Okay.
Right. And the like I've got an idea for next time. I'm not going to telegraph it. But it
Meanwhile, I'm going to be having conversations about how would you build a burn deck?
Right,
How would you
right.
build an oath deck for next
right.
time?
But it involves several two card monis, and again, but the key is ways to be consistent about those, right?
Sure.
Like, like hey, here's one card that can 2 or 3 card money with 3 or 4 different sets. You
Right.
know,
So in this case, you had fabricate in those cards. You could also do something like
Right.
Latamari's Call and Worldly Tutor.
Exactly.
To do the same kind of thing with
Cord,
creatures.
Yes. Enlightened Tutor, which didn't get drafted.
Whatever the new green, what is it? The green X spell finale of
Finale
something?
did get drafted.
It did.
Yeah.
But it was bad.
Right.
But yeah, this could be good in that kind of
Yeah.
deck.
Right. Absolutely. So the so any number of those things. Gamble did get drafted. I don't know if they actually ran it or not, but Gamble would have been. I would have been fine with Gamble with Duretti.
Yeah, Gamble's good.
So, yeah, I mean, I think for me, but I mean, I don't know if Burn's bad or not. I don't know. I mean, there's enough burn spells.
Yeah.
You could easily do it, right? It's fast. I mean, in the Northwest ones, how many of those has Burn?
So I definitely recall one burn deck doing very well. Or at least being drafted and people taking it seriously.
Right.
I'm not going to say it did well. The one big takeaway from that occurring, though, was that how much pressure it put on the dual lands and how high it pushed how high it pushed all of the fetches. So like
Right.
right here, you can see Paul Teft Meeker ended up doing 1 and 6, so not
Okay.
well is when
Right.
he drafted Burn. But he like took the
Mesa really high. Wow.
yeah Mesa's
Ruby the
second
Mesa.
pick.
Man.
So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with all
Right.
these takes. But like, where was Scalding Tarn taken? Okay, so Scalding Tarn was taken 10th pick,
Right.
and in this format, I think this is really cool because we have the St. Louis Vintage Rotisserie Draft where dual lands have repeatedly been taken in the 10th to 15th
Right.
picks. At this point, duels and fetches got taken around 30.
Okay.
So it's just like a very different style, and this
Right.
is a cool thing you get to see, right?
Well,
As local metas evolve
one
and
thing
people
I'll
play with
say
each other.
is, my advice is know your deck, right? So if
Yeah,
you look at my land draft,
yeah,
I didn't get in on the good duels, and I was okay with that
uh huh,
because I knew I needed double black for Lily.
sure,
I knew I needed double blue for Mana Drain, double
yep,
blue for Narset, right? Double blue for Urza, triple blue for Whir. So I was happy to take Cascade Bluffs, Sunken Ruins, and eventually Graven Carns, right?
yes,
Because those get me 1 into 2 really easy
yep,
and give me that filter. So I think those, especially if you're in kind of a 3 color thing, are I think a lot of other people missed the boat on those and might have had mana trouble. Yeah, they're not fetchable, but you're not going to have all the fetches anyway.
right. And you have a 40 card deck.
Yeah, you have a 40 card deck. So Prismatic Vista went. It was a smart pick. I can't remember who took it, but I think it was
It
Elaine.
was Elaine, yeah.
Yeah,
Elaine took like 12 lands. I think Elaine went a little too deep on the
she
strategy you're
did.
describing.
Yeah, I think she did. Um,
No one took City of Brass, which annoyed me to no end.
right. Someone
But
took
yeah,
Confluence, didn't they?
a Confluence went, and then City didn't.
Right.
Crumbling Necropolis did for some reason.
That's tap. That's a tap 3 color
It
line.
is,
Yeah,
yeah.
that one's
It's
up.
the Shard land.
Yeah.
But okay, so in VRD 5 though, there was a pretty similar. Sorry, VRD 4. There was a similar. There was a similar burn style deck,
Okay.
which was this one where Josh Ventura ended up getting Ruby Pearl first and second pick,
Oh,
and
nice.
then went
Man,
into
nice.
Bolt, and then took all of the fetches that
Right.
just like forced people like a scramble and picks 4 through 10
Right.
into the fetches.
And see, this is why I think the strategy works here. Interestingly, though, because you can only do that, but look at the next picks. Then he doesn't take his action other than Bolt, which
Right.
probably went early.
Yeah.
Wear Tear, Rest in Peace, Stony, like these are all solid cards that doesn't like these could be this could be red white control,
Yeah.
right? This could be any number of things. Is Johnny Vengeance a bit weird there? Probably. That's also older, so there's better Johnny's now. Like Vengeance. No, Vengeance is good. That's the red
Vengeance
white
is
one.
very good.
No, that's right. I was thinking of Johnny Goldmane.
Johnny Vengeance is the one
It's
that
the Destroy.
casts Armageddon.
Right. That's the good one. That's the right one. Never mind.
Yeah.
Um, but like he's literally control almost, and then by that point, the burn spells are free, right? You can take all of these things.
Right. It's not like
So,
anyone else is going to be taking Boros Charm.
right. I think this list is very solid.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to go with that aggressive list. It's aggressive with the disruption. If you want to go aggressive, my thing is treat it like Maverick.
Sure.
Right. Treat it
Yeah,
like
kind
Maverick.
of
Right.
very similar to.
This is Red White Maverick. That's what that list is. Look at it. Spirit of the Labyrinth,
Yeah.
Hellspark, Lightning Helix, sure, but Relic. He has like a mom in there or the new mom even. Treat it like Maverick.
Well, that's very similar to Vince's list as well this time.
Yeah.
Vince just didn't have the red controlling pieces to
And
it.
just didn't have enough focus. I think he just ended up with he had some
Yeah.
cute ideas, and that's fine. I mean, but I do think that was the thing is if you're gonna do one of these, whoever's out there, if you all want to you're all putting one together. My argument is you have your plan. Don't get too sold. Like as again, I actually my plan coming in was to have 2 plans. I had a plan and a backup plan.
Okay. Are you going to share your backup or is
Yeah, my
that
black
the
was
next
going into Teferi.
one? Okay.
Was not the black.
Yep.
Was not the red going to Teferi.
Yep.
I didn't audible into it enough.
I
I
see.
didn't audible. I got so having a plan is not enough. Be willing to do the plan,
Right.
right? So my 100% my backup was Teferi Time Raveler, which should have been drafted. The card is bonkers.
Very good.
Would have been amazing in this format. I think it's probably a top 10 pick in this format. It's that good. I mean, with all the counter spells, the bounce.
Yeah. I can see it. I don't think I agree, but I can see the argument for it.
It shuts down their shuts down their counter spell, shuts down their instant speed, allows you to do funny things at instant speed. I mean, here's just standard story the other day. So I won a tournament the other day, cash tournament for standard. Was playing a guy
Humble
with
brags.
yeah, humble brag, right? Was playing a guy. I've been playing good Magic lately. It's rare I play good Magic. uh, then was playing a guy who was playing the red white feather deck.
Mm-hmm.
So now, admittedly, he mulls to 5, right? So he's on a bad start. He's probably losing this game no matter what. I'm playing Bant Ramp. So Nissa Bant Ramp. I go turn 2 to Fairy. Or he goes turn 2. I go turn 2 to Fairy. He drops a Vanguard, the vampire that you can pump to make or pay life to make indestructible.
Yeah.
I roll tick to Fairy, or I bounce it. No, he dropped that first. I dropped to Fairy, I bounce it.
Okay.
So he drops it again. I roll up to Fairy. He attacks, cast a pump spell. I cast instant speed and Trancing Melody to steal it. Right.
God.
So then he plays the 2-drop, or the one that has haste. So Entrancing Melody is an X steal spell, right?
Yes.
He plays the one that has haste, that when you pump it, it's like 10th Street something, when you 10th District, sorry, not Street.
10th or
I don't know.
10th.
It's a
Spelling.
red white. It's a red white card that this guy, yeah.
Legionnaire.
Yeah, Legionnaire. So he plays this. I next turn again instant speed steal with Entrancing Melody.
Dear
so
God.
then he plays Feather. I pass my turn. He attacks with it. I instant speed steal with Entrancing Melody.
Wow.
Just instant speed sorceries, right? So I mean, let's take a look at, let's say, like Elaine's deck. If Elaine is getting to cast,
Let's get over to Elaine's deck a minute here.
right, Thought Erasure at instant speed.
Yeah.
If she's getting to cast Divest at instant speed, Braid's already instant speed.
Sure.
Any of these type of things at instant speed, I think that
Show and tell.
yeah, show
End
and
of
tell.
your show tell.
Yeah. That's just powerful, and I think you can really build around it. And I mean, this is where the vintage does matter, right? Like, look at vintage now. If a card in general, if a card is good enough for vintage, it's probably good enough for here. I think there's some exceptions. Like, I don't think that Lodestone Golem is actually good in this format.
Ooh, interesting.
And the reason is you go back to those shop decks, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got to have a heavy mono brown shop deck like the previous formats did that all lost.
Sure.
And then those are just so easy to hate out.
That's very true.
So I don't think Lodestone has as much value as it did not get. It got drafted way too. Or back here, yeah.
So somebody tried it in VRD 7, and Martin
that was the
went
best
3 and
one,
4.
right? But if you look at the earlier ones we looked at,
Oh yeah, garbage.
They were garbage,
1 and 6
right?
each time.
Yeah,
Didn't even get drafted in 6.
one it got drafted. I'm pretty sure I saw it in there.
Yeah. No, people thought that it was vintage. And
Right.
It's not. I think you're right.
So I think there's a few cards that are like, obviously this is in vintage and should be, but not here. But a lot of times, I mean, it's something like, again, the Walkers, like Narset, Karn, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, what are these offering? What are these doing? Narset's a dig through time.
Yeah.
That only gets me can't get a creature or land. But in this format, like, there was one time where I was like, Narset, go up, get a Lotus. Oh, now I can play Teferi's Puzzle Box and win because
Right.
Narset dug me into the Lotus to need it, right?
Yeah.
Narset's a dig through time on a body, 2 dig through times essentially.
Sure.
2 half dig through times together, a total dig through that stops them from drawing extra cards and slows down their shenanigans.
One thing I'm going to point out here about this black-red list, or the red-white list that I think is funny, the card that they took, Chill, which, despite not being able to cast, there are so few great cards against red.
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
being able to just shut down this was insane, and they decided to take it.
Yeah, it is.
Because I think right before this, somebody else took the white one that makes Warmth. Somebody took Warmth at some point around
I
here.
have no warmth.
Oh, Warmth is one of those other classic hate pieces that says whenever they cast a red spell, you gain 2 life.
Oh God!
Right?
Yeah. No, that's smart. I think there's a few. I don't think I did enough of those.
Right. And I think that's kind of, I think that would be the thing I'd be looking for next time, is just to hopefully, if I'm in it, I guarantee I'll be spending at least 10 of my picks on these kind of cards.
I think being on 2 colors helps you to be able to do that,
Yes,
though, right?
for sure.
Again,
If you're in 3.
right? If you're in 3, you've got to go a little more. But again, and then the other thing is, as I fully admitted, I was not thinking of this as this has got to come down to a 40 card deck. So
Right.
like every card, I was thinking like, oh, this is going to my deck, and then like Kadaltha Forge Match, like, oh, this is going to my deck. This is going to be amazing.
Yes.
No, this isn't even going to my deck, and I never even tutored it with Karn because I could generally just tutor Bridge to stop them from winning, or most of the time it was just tutor up Lattice and win. You know.
Similarly, like Blood Moon. Blood Moon is a card that can see play in this format, but it's just
Yeah,
there's everyone is gonna have basics. You
yeah,
don't get
everyone's
the
gonna have
same shutdown
basics. I don't.
potential.
It does not.
Yeah,
I thought about Blood Moon, and I decided against it. And I'm a Ponza player. I love some Blood Moon, so
absolutely.
I like people not to play Magic when they can.
But yeah, I think let's call it with that.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in with us, hanging out. I think that's a really good theory of this format, and I think that that's kind of a good way of approaching this. If you try to walk out with a vintage deck, you're going to be disappointed. If you try to walk out with an EDH deck, you're probably going to be happy. So hopefully this will help for anyone else trying to run these. And if you tune in, I think next week Monday we're going to have the next one of these, where uh, let's see what's going on Monday. We're going to have a conversation about, I believe, I'm gonna say it wrong if I don't actually check it right now. But tune in on Monday. We're gonna have another conversation. And at that
Who's going on
point,
Monday?
I think it's just me.
Oh,
Yeah, right. Just doing it live. Um, let's
do
see.
it live.
Do it live. Uh, but yeah, coming on Monday, we're gonna have another quick chat right at 7 p.m. Central, and we're gonna be kind of doing some of these quick chats so that we get to 7 of them. We give them affiliates. On Monday, we're actually going to build Burn live. So this is going to be like, how do you build the shell of a deck and just try to get something out there to like, these are the cards I roughly want. Kind of go through the same process
Right.
you did, where you come up with a list.
Well, real quick, just so I was looking through something I wanted to share on the combo
Yeah.
is so what I started doing already, because again, thinking about it like EDH, I started looking at the M20 cards
Oh, nice.
and saying like which of these I think has legs,
Yes.
and I've only seen 2 that I think have legs for the Vintage Rotisserie. One of them is the new double vampiric, the one that lets you vampiric and your opponent vampiric.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think if you do that in a Thought Scour or deck
you
with
remember the name of that
Ashiok, I have the list.
It doesn't do anything with Ashiok. You don't want it.
Well, but it does because you're going to mill them immediately from the top.
Okay,
You're going to do
fair.
it on your turn, and you're immediately going to mill them. It does not do anything with Ashiok traditionally, because you're making them. Ashiok only stops them from searching their yard, but you're making it. It's
Yeah.
called
This is the Seb McKinnon art. It's beautiful.
Seth McKinnon is one of my favorite artists right now, only because I think he is doing old school Magic art. I
Yeah.
think a lot of the new art is too busy for my liking,
It's in black.
and and
He definitely has a lot more focus. It feels a lot more like
it feels like old.
Yeah.
Scheming symmetry.
scheming sim. There we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, both
So-
players get to Imperial Seal.
Right. And then I'm going to Ashiok and mill you 4, or I'm going to mill you 2 with any of those little effects and draw
Reasonable.
a card. I'm gonna draw a card, draw my card while milling you 2 and get rid of yours. And not for every deck, but I think in the right deck.
Yeah.
And then I think a Johnny Strength of the Pride. I think there's an interesting life deck in this format
Okay.
that this would be just wild in, right? So the first ability is you gain life equal to the number of creatures or planeswalkers you control.
Yep.
Okay. Next one, -2 creates an Ajani's Pride Mate, right?
Okay.
But if you're at 15 more life than you're starting, you get to exile all their artifacts and creatures.
That is the only ability that sounds mildly interesting to me of these 3.
Right. Again, I don't know
I
if
don't
it's
know.
there, but I mean, I think it's something like Martyr.
Sure.
I think there's something you can play with, right?
Yeah, you
like
can do a Martyr
again,
Conquest.
in a EDH style mindset, there's some ways, like I haven't studied through all the Northwest ones, but I want to study through. Did anyone ever do Enchantress? I think that's an interesting
I
one.
think there was one Enchantress list.
Right.
I need to rewatch all those at some point. But
Yeah.
the other one card I'm going to turn you on to, Veil of Summer. This
Oh,
card is
the new
freaking
yeah.
hot.
That's good. There's some good hate cards actually.
So this card, if they cast you cast your creature, they cast Counterspell. You respond to Counterspell with this card that says counter your Counterspell and I draw a card for
Right.
1 mana.
Yeah.
So it's a 1 mana hard counter that draws a card.
Yeah.
And also makes the rest of your cards uncounterable for that turn.
Yeah, no, that's solid.
That's ludicrously good.
That's good.
Right? If you compare that to Autumn's Veil, which was already very playable, right? Autumn's Veil maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Autumn's Veil, which was already playable, it just was a straight up upgrades you by letting you draw a card.
Right.
Another card that was already playable but probably fringe, Overmaster,
Yeah.
which said that your next card you cast gets to be uncounterable and you draw a card.
Right.
Like, this is way better than either of these 2 cards, and both of them were already playable.
Yeah.
At least Legacy playable, probably playable in this format.
So yeah, but I think that's something to think about. Is like you're looking at that, you can kind of think like, all right, well, what kind of deck could be? 'Cause no one else is taking the life deck, right? So
Right.
if you can find some combos that you think are going to work, Now you're not going to want to rely on life to win because other people are going to be locking you out or just milling you out and things like that.
Yep.
But if you can find some combos that you think are going to work with life for like some auto wins, like getting the Etherflux Reservoir, type things,
Sure.
or
What's the 6/6 for one?
Reservoir.
The 6/6 for 1 mana. The 1 mana
Oh
that
yeah,
comes.
Sarah's something.
Yeah, it's
One of the many
definitely Sarah
Sarahs.
Ascendant.
Yeah, I
So
mean that
like,
one's a little rougher because you got a 30, but still it's solid. Life, you're not. No one else is dropping 1 drops very
yeah,
often. And then the enchantment deck, right? Are there ways like Elephant Grass, because the enchantment deck does something good, which is stop other people from doing things.
yes,
So I don't know. I don't know if it's good, but it's the type of things I'm exploring for the next time. So
that'll be cool.
kind of thinking it through. So
Well, thanks for joining me,
all right, thanks you,
and
man.
yeah,
Thank
see
you
you
all.
all on Monday.